Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And yeah, couple of thank you cards using some of the new products from Simon Says Stamps Just a Note release. I really wanted to use I think it's just apple layering stencils. I don't even have them in front of me because I washed them and they're set in their little thingy to dry. But I combined some ink blending with some Lunar paste to get some shine and did a little bit of background stamping, and yeah, that's basically it. And I've got a tiny little head start on some thank you cards for teachers because I never have enough. Yeah, always good to have on hand. So keep watching and I will show you guys how I made these cards. Alrighty, so my first step with these card fronts was I wanted to stamp a very subtle background. So I pulled out this oldie but goodie. This is the thank you text background, one of my favorites. This came out a few years ago. And I just put it face up on my work surface and I lightly inked it up with Simon's Positively Saturated ink in flannel, just a nice light gray ink. And then I'm just pressing a panel of white cardstock. Right now it's A2 sized. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to trim it down when I'm done anyway. So I did that twice because, like I always say, I got the supplies out. Why not make more than one? And also, like I said earlier, I can never have enough thank you teacher cards. I need to build up a stash so I'm not scrambling the night before something, to send a card. You know? Anyway, after I stamped those two panels with that background, I pulled out my Waffle flower, the biggest grip mat, because it holds my stencils and the paper and all the things. I'm really loving these mats. And yeah, I'm using the Layering Apples stencil set. This is 4 stencils. There's the base one here for the apples, and then there's a detail kind of piece, and I'm actually going to use that last, and I'll explain why when I get to it. And then the stems and the leaves. So for the main apple, I am using, I started with Simon's Watermelon Positively Saturated ink. There's kind of 3 shades in that trio. It's guava, watermelon, and cherry. And I'm going to I was going to use cherry originally, but I'm going to use that in a minute. So I started with watermelon and just using one of my blending brushes and blended that onto one of the panels that has the stamping. And then I have 2 extra panels here that are just plain white cardstock. And after I did the first panel, I removed it. Then I put the just plain white cardstock and then put the stencil back over it. And without re-inking my brush, I've shown this in many videos, but without re-inking my brush, I just lightly blend and use whatever ink is kind of left over on the stencil. So I'll just get a much lighter stenciled version, because those panels, the ones that don't have the stamping on them, those are going to go on the inside of the card. So it ties it all together, and it just works. So and then I'm just going to keep repeating this process. So I did the second panel with the stamping and the ink, and then removed it. And then without re-inking the brush or anything, I lightly stenciled it over the second just plain white panel. So I did that for the apple bases, and then I'm going on to do the stems. Same thing. I'm using Simon's MOCHA ink for this one. So blending this onto one of the stamped panels, those are going to be the card fronts. So ink blended that onto the stamp panel, and then I can just quickly remove this and then put in the plain one, and then without re-inking my brush, and I also depending on the color of the ink, etc., I will also a lot of times use just a very light hand, I'm not pressing. I said that in a recent video. It's very hard to show that on camera. But I'm not using heavy pressure when I'm, trying to get a lighter hand, because these panels that I want to put on the inside, obviously I don't want it to be too intense so that it's easy to write over and actually have the writing be legible. So did that for the stems, repeated the process for the second ones. And then there's the little stencil that does the little leaf, which is just, I don't know, these are just really cute. And for these, I used PEARFECTION Positively Saturated ink. And for the stamped panels, I did, full strength ink on those. And then, again, pop the stencil off, pop the panel off, stuck the second one on, or like the non-stamped, like the plain panel, and then just lighter hand using what little ink is left on the stencil, and then just repeating the process for the second stamp panel and the second plain panel. So I did all of this, and then I'm going to use the stencil that does kind of the detail on the apples, but I'm going to do the insides first. There's a method to the madness. So finished off the little leaves, and then I'm just going to leave this is the plain one, or one of the plain ones. I'm going to leave that on my grip mat, and then I'm going to bring in this stencil here that adds the detail. This is where I'm going to use the cherry ink. This is where I have to work a little harder, in a sense. This didn't take long, but I've mentioned this. I have a very heavy hand. I like to just go in, add it all. I'm barely touching the brush to that cherry ink because it is a very deep, like, red color. And I'm tapping it off on the inside of the lid, as well as like tapping it off on scrap paper off to the side there, and just lightly blending this. So I'll get that detail, but again, it's not super dark, and it'll just be nice on the inside of the card. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on the second plain panel, just very, very light, soft inking. So that's going to finish off the insides. And then I'm going to go in and use this stencil on what will be the card fronts. So, and I did this inking first because I'm going to use a paste for this. I thought it'd be kind of fun to like add sort of like a glossy effect, some texture. So I'm putting the stamp panel back, lining up the stencil, and I'm going to use some Simon Hurley Lunar paste. And I went with the Game Over color, just nice, really deep red. So, yeah, and these pastes work pastes work fine on top of these grip mats. I think Waffle Flower did a little video on their Instagram just showing like they were using like pastes and like paints and different things. And this is my first time using like a paste with a stencil over the grip mats. Works great. I'm going to be doing this more often. I was a little like, this might be fun to try and clean off. It wipes off the photopolymer like a dream. So I just applied the paste with a palette knife, and then I used my big old stencil pal just to like kind of smooth it out for the most part, but more often, like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth. That was more to just remove a lot of the excess that's like sitting on top of the stencil and the cardstock. So I did all that, and you guys can't see it because, I'm filming straight down, but I had run out of space at this point on my desk. I've talked about this a lot. I am a very messy crafter. When I removed the stencil, I was holding it in my teeth so I could remove everything and then put the second panel down. So anyway, you got to do what you got to do. So did the same thing, applied the paste with a palette knife, and then I just scraped right over it with my big old stencil pal to remove all of that excess. And then I can put that right back in the jar. Close the jar. People ask me about these pastes and press and seal because I go on about press and seal. Yes, use press and seal on them. Have I done it yet? No. Do I follow my own rules? No. Like everything, do as I say, not as I do. But so far it's been great. Anyway, remove the stencil, put it back in my mouth to hold it so that I could remove the panel. I made a little oopsie, fixed it a little bit with the palette knife. Then I can remove that panel from the grip mat, and yeah, it just wipes off. The paste just wipes right off. I just used a baby wipe. That was great. And then my actual stencil, the stencil pal and the palette knife and the other stencils, I just took the sink, cleaned them with soap and water, good to go, and then set them aside to dry. So while the backgrounds were drying, I die cut scraps of black cardstock as well as Simon's glossy black cardstock and the white cardstock with the new CZ Design Teacher wafer die. So I did 2 layers of the just black cardstock, and then it'll be topped with the glossy cardstock, which I just love that. It's a game changer. Back in the day, in the olden times, we used to have to use glossy accents to, add that gloss to die cuts, and now we've got glossy cardstock, and it's just so nice, because glossy accents I love glossy accents. I'm the worst for like poking at it. Is it dry yet? And then I wreck it. So Yeah, I love glossy cardstock. So anywho, stacked those layers together with craft tacky glue. And I have that little Gina K, that's a Gina K Precision bottle that I have craft tacky glue in. And I use that when I'm dealing with little finicky die cuts like this. So I just add my little bits of adhesive, stacked them all together to give them dimension. And then I popped these onto the outlines that I die cut just from scraps of white cardstock. So I got those all adhered together. And then once I had my sentiments, adhered, then I'm going to go on and trim down little companion sentiments. And another new thing from this release is the CZ Design sentiment strips. This is the reverse teacher. These are the ones that are, white wording on black. I've used a bunch of different ones. Like Simon has tons of different sentiment strip packs. And I love them. I've shown them in a bajillion videos. So anyway, all I trimmed down from these were just the little thank you words. And I like there's extras. Like there's like several like thank you, and just a bunch of good sentiments in here. So all I used this time was a thank you. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of other ones. And after I trimmed those little sentiments, I trimmed down these backgrounds. By this point, the backgrounds are dry, like that paste is dry. So I trimmed these down with my trimmer as well. I had also off camera trimmed down the ones that are going to go on the inside of the card. And I trimmed down some green leaf cardstock to just slightly bigger to frame these card fronts, just to give them a little more color, bring in some green. Why not? So adhered those together with craft tacky glue. And then after I got my card fronts adhered to the green cardstock, my card bases are going to be, shocker, Neenah Desert Storm cardstock again. I'm fixating again. Neenah Desert Storm. Regardless, it's one of my favorites. I love Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. It's just beautiful. I love it. It's the perfect neutral. So I cut a sheet of that in half, and then I'm scoring those in half. So these are going to be top folding A2 cards. So 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So those will be my card bases. And then those panels that I had stenciled without the stamping, those are going onto the insides. So I've got those cute little apples, and just in a slightly more subtle version. So like I said, easier to write on, and you can actually read it. So adhered those with craft tacky glue. And then I was going to adhere the card fronts like directly to the card bases, but then decided to give it a little more dimension. So I'm going to back these with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. And you can see my roll is getting much smaller. The reason they call it Big Mama, if you're not familiar with this foam tape, is the roll itself is enormous, like about the size of a vinyl record. I can't referring to kind of the olden times, although vinyl records made a massive comeback. Like they've become very like niche, Anyway, I put the Big Mama foam tape on the back of those, popped those onto the card bases, and then I decided to put the foam tape on the back of the die cut sentiments as well, because again, dimension is life. And it just gave it that little extra something. So trim those down with my little Simon. I always forget the name. Like there's a name for these scissors. Pawsitively Everyday scissors. They're great. They're my go-to scissors now for trimming foam tape because they're just perfect. Anyway, put the sentiments into place. Once those are adhered, for those little thank you sentiments, I just used one of my little waffle flower black foam strips. So got those into place. And then, like always, of course, I had bling that matched. And I knew, yeah. Sometimes I'm really great. People ask like how I like keep track of what I have. I don't. I'm really bad for that. I'm for the most part, I can keep track in my head for the most part. But more often than not, I'm hunting around trying to find something that's like, I swear I had this, or, anyway. Studio Katya Moss Green Pearls. Perfect shade of green. They just, like, they match Simon Says Stamps green leaf cardstock, like, to a T. I love it. So I just put just a few of those onto these cards. Just, you got to have a little bit of bling. And then I adhered those into place with dabs of craft tacky glue. And then once I got those adhered, these cards are complete. So, like always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. In the blog post, I have like the full-size pictures of everything. I have picture links to all the supplies I used. So you can just expand the description box below the video to check all that out. And then I always have like the supply list linked directly below as well. And links to all my social medias, all the fun things. So you can check that out below if you are interested. As always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting and letting the robot overlords know that you guys like what you're seeing. And subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And stay tuned. Like I said, I've got a ton of videos coming. So yeah, I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.